Alright, Joel, let's take a look at your paper. So MLA format first. Joel, we need all of this on the left side. And this is more than, I think more than double space, it kind of looks like. Um, and it goes your name, my name, class, date, and date. This is the wrong format. You need your last name and page number up here in the corner, which it's not, and you need a title, which is not there. So you're going to have to fix all of that. So you start with a quote from Rowling, which after this you're going to put the citation, which is just in parentheses her last name and then the page number that this appears on. So you got to fix that. And then you jump right into high school as far as a tipping point. But what you really need to do is move this, okay, up here, because after the quote you need to explain the quote and what it means before you jump into what it means to high school. So make that connection there. Probably one of the biggest errors so far is your run-on sentences and all the comma splices that we talked about this year. When I began high school at Alma, I didn't know, which should be a comma, I didn't know what I was getting into. This is not a comma here. I feared the unknown is a complete sentence, semicolon, or new sentence, or comma conjunction, something like that. So all the times you see a comma, is it separating two complete sentences? Prior to Alma, I wasn't that big kid that did things that fit in. I expanded and tried to discover who I was. This is a run-on sentence, so here's your comma splice. So you got to go back through and fix those. There's probably about 3 or 4 in this first paragraph. One down here as well. So I would say that I'm not exactly sure what your main points are. This sounds like your main points, but I'm pretty sure you're going to go year by year as far as what happened to you. Don't use very. But what are your main points, and then what is your ultimate thesis statement down here? Because as I kept reading a little bit more, you talked about jumping in back to this quote, and then when I was welcomed, I'm assuming you're going to start to talk about your first year here. So this kind of almost seems like an extension of your introduction. I'm not exactly sure where you're going. But go back to the assignment sheet. Figure out what's supposed to go in that introduction and make sure it's all there before you move on to this next paragraph. Alright, this is all over the place, Joel. Number one, make sure high school is 2 words. So you talk about being welcomed, and that was good. But then you talk about your grades and how that has affected you, and do some good reflection actually back on that. I began to understood the choice I made had consequences that they affected me either way. So you do some good reflection here, and then you go on to talk about college, etc. And you're not look good on college. So what this really needs is just a focus. Is this about and again, go back, because you don't have a thesis statement. I don't know what the message is that you're trying to communicate in these body paragraphs. And if I did know that message, I could help you organize this body paragraph. So try to figure out what that message is you're sending. What did you ultimately learn about high school through all of these experiences? And how does what you're talking about in this paragraph make that, how does that come through? Comma errors too throughout high school, comma, I began to understand. As I progressed in my education, comma, I began to start thinking. So anyways, you got to go back through and look at some of those college, or look at some of those commas. And also you need to make sure that you have strong transitions. How do you link this paragraph to this paragraph? Because I think if you talk about BPA, which is good, I mean, that's all about job skills, so I think that would work well as a transition statement. So make that transition statement happen. Alright, so now you talk about BPA, and you just have to put if you leave that out and just put this in quotes, it's accepted that that's what it stands for, so you don't have to put for short in there. At first I was nervous because I didn't want to venture into the unknown or a place I didn't know. So here's a good example of not needing a comma. A place I didn't know, just because you have a conjunction here. This is not an independent clause, so you don't need one there. So this is a pretty good paragraph as far as you do some reflection, so on and so forth. There's a couple, I mean, jarring things as far as uh, like word choice. Uh, those friends, I think he used those friends a couple of times. I realized all the friends I made through this process. But you said when I finally did decide, I realized all the friends I made. But you didn't realize that till after you joined. So uh, make sure that you have that word choice and structure a little bit better. Uh, I've learned that through tough times, if you give it your all, you can make it through. This sounds like a message, but I don't know if this is a message about your whole paper or just this. So that might be a good thesis statement if you can move it up into your introduction if that applies to all your body paragraphs. Um, this is the little jarring part. I didn't. All of a sudden, your grandma dies, which out of nowhere, and then that's the reason that you really enjoyed BPA because your friends helped you through that, which I think is awesome. And here's another example of comma not being needed here. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, our resume and cover letter assignment that we're doing, you're gonna be awesome at. So that's pretty sweet. So, anyways, I know I just set up a resume. Resume doesn't need to be capitalized. Um, and those are dire to getting a job. I like the word dire. That's a different word. So, not a bad paragraph. You do some reflection, which is good. And again, we need a strong transition into the next one. Uh, and this is not what I mean by a strong transition. I've mentioned previously about the friends I met in BPA. I know I just read that. You don't have to say that again. Basically, you just need to have a strong topic sense of what this paragraph is going to be about. All right, now we're jumping back into friends again, and apparently dyeing your hair. So I think maybe we need to separate this a little bit. Maybe one, um, maybe one of your paragraph is about your acceptance into Alma High School and maybe switching schools and that perseverance. One is strictly about BPA. The next is about the friends you made, which you can dive into BPA friends. But I think you can write a whole thing just on the skills that you learned in BPA as something that you went through. Because I don't know, this feels like just a lot of random information as far as you had friends which encourage you to do this, which kind of let you discover yourself, but I feel like that's two or three different topics into one. And again, go through places that you don't need commas, um, and look at some of those places. While the consequences wasn't necessarily a good outcome, I'm not sure what that means because no one made teased or made fun of you. So what was the bad outcome? Parents didn't like it, or somebody else teased you? I don't know. So go back through and look at that. But I really think about the organization of this paragraph and how it's going to turn out because I don't know if this is the best format for it right now. All right, maybe another suggestion as I read the next paragraph. Maybe your whole paper should be about essentially like how your friends have influenced you. Like the paper topic's about what you learned in high school, and maybe that thing that you've learned is that your friends can push you to do great things. I don't know, maybe something like that. Because this is about your friends pushing you to take different classes. And the previous paragraph is about your friends pushing you to expand your horizons with your looks or your personality. And this is about your friends pushing you to join BPA. Um, and maybe not just friends, but people in general, because then you could add in the concept of the grades, and maybe there were some teachers that pushed you with grades, because again, this is jumping all over the place with classes, and it's like you've learned things like you took art to realize you shouldn't go into art, which is fine, but then you talk about Michigan history, which you don't say anything about it other than you wanted to learn about Michigan and your friends are in it, but then you don't expand on it, but it's really culinary arts that you expand on. So I'd get rid of Michigan history completely. I'd almost get rid of basic art and expand on the idea of your culinary arts class. And maybe even make the joke that my friends thought I was artistic, but it wasn't on paper that I was artistic, it was in the kitchen or something like that. So I would maybe think about that as a way to make that work as far as a topic. or a focus for this paragraph, but I really think this whole paper really needs to be focused a little bit differently. You don't need to capitalize high school, by the way. Love the idea of becoming a pastry chef, Joel. I think that's really cool. So that's really neat. And I like that you went to Mount Pleasant, but actually you made up more friends in the class. And then here's another good example, comma conjunction, but this is not an independent thought, so you don't need that comma there. Now, I already tell you your conclusion is super long, so maybe think of a way to pare that down. All right, and actually I tell you it's too long, and I do think it's too long, but it flows really nicely as far as summarizing all your points. Be careful with very. I think there's a time and place for it, but I think you use it a couple times too many. So just be conscientious of that. Watch for comma errors as well in here, like culinary arts, comma, for example. So go back through and look at that. Here's what I want you to do. Besides we talked about reorganizing this paper anyway, but make sure you start with your thing that you learned. Once you figure out what that thing is, and then think about your quote again. If we go all the way back up to the top here, the consequences of action are always so complicated, so diverse that predicting the future is a very difficult business indeed. Go back to that concept and explore it here at the end of your paper, and maybe even more in your paper, the idea of being so complicated. And because now you look back and you're like, oh, those were great decisions I just made. So maybe talk about how it was complicated at first but turned out great. I don't know, something like that. No works added to page, so obviously you're going to add that, and that's going to adversely affect your grade. Joel, really good voice. You have some good details in here. Like I said, the organization is what really needs to happen overall. So hopefully we'll see that in the next version.